The best films of 2021. Let's go. I could make a list where I do a bunch of big popular movies, like the new Spider-Man movie, the new Justice League movie, or I could do a list where I do a bunch of weird art house dramas that nobody saw to bring more attention to filmmakers like that. But I'm not really gonna do either. I'm gonna kind of do a combination of the two. Even the art house films on here are pretty big, popular, well-known movies. There are a lot of movies I didn't see over the year, but this is a list of what my personal favorites were. There aren't any documentaries on this list either. These are all fictional films. I feel documentaries could fill up an entire list, so I'm leaving them out. When I say these are the best movies, it is a purely subjective best. I like some weird out there stuff, so take that into account. I don't attempt to rate or review films with complete objectivity. There are naturally certain directors, actors, and genres that just appeal to me more. Let's get on to the films that might be worthy of this list, but I haven't seen them yet. I haven't seen the new James Bond or any of the Daniel Craig Bond films, so I might need to catch up on those and marathon them one day. I've heard they're pretty good. I haven't seen Kenneth Branagh's black and white nostalgia film Belfast or Mike Mills' Joaquin Phoenix-led Come On, Come On because they're $20 to rent, and I'm not sure if they'd break into my top 10 or not. There is a 3-hour Japanese road trip film based on a short story by Haruki Murakami called Drive My Car that might be top 10, but it's only in theaters and none anywhere near me. So I might have to revise this list later, but here's how it stands now. The Oscars always cut off somewhere in Q1 of the following year, but for purposes of my list, I'm going by the date attached to the film. Sometimes a film screens at a film festival at the tail end of one year, and then gets wider release the following year. But the first screening is technically the release date. This is complicated because sometimes a movie like The Night House gets a screening in January of 2020, and then gets released for the public in September of 2021. Technically, it's still listed as a film from 2020. Therefore, I won't include it on my list for 2021, but it does get an honorable mention. It's from David Bruckner, the director behind The Ritual, which was a slow burn horror film in which a group of friends hike through the woods as the protagonist deals with the guilt over the death of a friend. They're subsequently terrorized by a mysterious entity. The Night House is an art house horror film about a woman who has lost her husband and is experiencing grief as she is either encountering a demon or losing her mind. The woman losing her mind film is basically a subgenre at this point. It's done quite well here with a subtly creepy atmosphere and, in my opinion, a better ending than The Ritual because it's a little more ambiguous. Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk, also just missed the cut. It's basically a comedy remake of the original John Wick film, and it's a lot of fun with some creative action and a pop soundtrack out of the playbook of Scorsese or Tarantino. It's directed by Ilya Naishuller, who previously directed Hardcore Henry, but this one is a lot better. I enjoyed Guillermo del Toro's new film Nightmare Alley, focusing on the story of a carnival grifter played by Bradley Cooper, though the pacing in the second act causes the film to sag a little in the middle. Willem Dafoe, Toni Collette, and Cate Blanchett all provide great supporting roles. A fascinating opening 50 minutes with beautiful cinematography, costumes, and sets throughout. It's a remake of a 1947 noir film, and the plot at times can be a little generic as a result, though the themes are presented effectively. It's not my favorite from Del Toro, though certainly a very good one. Zack Snyder's Justice League is also in this category because there were a few superhero films I liked more, but I'm happy we finally have a solid Justice League live adaptation. It could have been trimmed in places, but the problem with the original is that too much was cut out, and this was released on streaming, so length wasn't as much of an issue. It's a unique case for a movie to be completely recut and released again, so it does get an honorable mention. The Last Duel from Ridley Scott has been at the center of much discussion because of how little money it made. It's basically late night comedy fodder at this point.
Anyone here seen The Last Duel? No one here has seen The Last Duel.
While I have qualms with Matt Damon and Adam Driver's performances at times, I still mostly like the acting here. It is a little stiff given the nature of the time period. It is a really well-made Rashomon-style film set in the 1300s, in which 3 accounts of the same situation, involving the rape of its lead character, played by Jodie Comer, are given. The duel between squire and knight bookends the film, and it's all based on a true story in which themes involving faith and honor are explored. Let's move on to my number 10 pick, which is another Adam Driver film, and this might be a questionable pick. Number 10, Annette, a film I found extremely bizarre yet memorable. The first English-language film from experimental French filmmaker Léos Carax, starring Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. It's a postmodern deconstruction of the rock opera with music by the band Sparks. It's a completely off-the-wall musical where Adam Driver is an edgy and dark stand-up comedian. Marion Cotillard is his opera-singing wife, and they have a child together who is literally a puppet, though the characters all treat the child as though it's real. It seems laughably bad in places, but I myself really enjoyed it. I could see this being on others' worst of lists, so I placed it here at number 10 because I want it on my list somewhere, even though it's a very divisive film.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. What's your problem? Your fucking problem.
Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story would probably be the more obvious pick for a musical, though I haven't seen it. Number 9, Spider-Man: No Way Home. If you're really into superhero movies, this might be a lot higher on the list for you. It's a little further down on my list because this film just doesn't stand on its own that well. There are at least 7 other movies that need to be seen to fully appreciate all of the humor and nuance, but it still comes out as one of the best Spider-Man movies, up there with the first 2 Sam Raimi films. The dramatic arcs for Peter and MJ are the best yet of the Tom Holland films, the action set pieces are excellent, and the humor is mostly on point. My other criticisms are that there are some jarring editing decisions in just a few places, and just a few too many jokes adjacent to the more dramatic scenes that deflate the moody atmosphere of those scenes just a little bit. John Watt's direction is solid, it's more creative than his previous Spider-Man films. Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina kill it in their reprisal roles, and I don't have many more criticisms other than that 2 of the other villains feel underwritten and unnecessary. This one does have a lot of spoilers involved, so I'm not going to say any more. It's a really fun movie about an iconic character. Number 8, The Suicide Squad. So I did place Suicide Squad higher than Spider-Man, and this is simply a matter of personal preference for the humor of James Gunn over the humor of the MCU. Yeah, I know it's a Sony film, but it's a Sony MCU hybrid. And I prefer Idris Elba as a lead over Tom Holland. Although Willem Dafoe as the lead villain in Spider-Man is a lot better than the lead villain in Suicide Squad. These 2 spots could be interchangeable. James Gunn brings the same magic he brought to the Guardians films, but with more adult humor that subtly calls back to his early days making trauma films. The soundtrack is killer, and there is special care taken to make the action scenes unique and memorable. It also has a fun sci-fi comedy take on the typical doomsday scenario set in every superhero movie. It's still the sequel to a bad movie, though it doesn't necessarily require seeing the original to enjoy it. Number 7, Judas and the Black Messiah, directed by Shaka King. Came out in February of 2021, so by now Daniel Kaluuya has won Best Supporting Actor, and it's totally justified. He is the standout role of the film as Black Panther Fred Hampton, and he is mostly the film's focus, although it's really framed through the experience of William O'Neill, a duplicitous individual and the subject of much animosity. It's a more balanced take than what you'd usually see of the Black Panther Party in a film, and instead of a straight biopic, it's a well-paced thriller with some really haunting scenes. The use of the piece by Bill Evans when Fred is being released from prison comes to mind.
Y'all say that shit before you get back to the house, all right?
The leads, though both exceptional, were a lot older than the real-life people they played, and it lost a little of realism because it doesn't completely communicate how young these guys were. Also, Martin Sheen as J. Edgar Hoover looked like a cartoon character, which stood out because the rest of the film was so serious. Still, I liked the perspective it took on a real situation, It's a tense thriller and a biopic mashup, and it has two stunning lead performances. Number 6, Red Rocket, is the new Sean Baker film, the story of Mikey Saber, a washed-up porn star who returns to his small hometown in Texas where he leeches off of his old friends and sells drugs as he plans his big return to LA and the world of porn. Mikey is narcissistic, manipulative, and sociopathic, and this is a great naturalistic film that doesn't pass judgment on the morality of its main character, it simply presents his actions and lets the viewer judge. Like in Baker's previous films, The Florida Project and Tangerine, this is a slice-of-life movie about an impoverished sex worker in a desperate situation, though executed with a sense of dark humor. It just came out, so I don't want to deeply go into the spoilers yet. It's not a film for everyone, but I loved it. Number 5, Licorice Pizza, the new Paul Thomas Anderson flick, is a loose, meandering 1970s nostalgia piece about a 15-year-old child actor and idealist who falls for a 25-year-old woman who is floundering in her life, and they embark on quirky misadventures together. It's kind of a romantic comedy. It's also a film about a time and a place and has some fun cameos from John C. Reilly in the background as Fred Gwynn, who played Herman Munster, to Sean Penn as a crazy drunk actor who is friends with the Tom Waits character, and Bradley Cooper as John Peters, a film producer and smooth-talking Lothario who provides good comedy and antagonism. Cooper Hoffman, who plays the lead Gary, is the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman, who Anderson featured frequently in his films. The other lead, Alana Haim, is from the rock band Haim. There are a lot of young, unknown actors in this film, and they all get some time to shine. The soundtrack is filled with great 70s music, and the remaining score is done by Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead. This is a refreshing film for Paul Thomas Anderson to make, who has been engaging in a lot of dark and brooding films lately. This is the most carefree film he's done since Punch Drunk Love or Boogie Nights. Number 4, Titane, is a new body horror film from French director Julia Ducournau. Her previous film Raw was about a young vegetarian girl who begins to crave human flesh after eating meat for the first time. It was all executed as a coming-of-age metaphor with sexual desire being replaced with cannibalism. I wasn't sure if Ducournau could top Raw in terms of extreme body horror, but this film might be even crazier. The main character is a nightclub dancer with a steel plate in her head who has a fetish for metal objects, cars in particular. It goes to unexpected places starting in the second act, and there are themes about gender, male bonding, and the unification of man and machine. It's best to just go into this film cold because everything that happens feels like a spoiler. It's very disturbing and visceral, and it's one of my favorite films of the year because I'm a complete weirdo. Speaking of French directors, I must have a French bias because the next film is from a Canadian French director. Number 3, Dune Part 1, directed by Denis Villeneuve, is a moody and atmospheric adaptation of the first part of the original Dune book, with an all-star cast led by Timothée Chalamet and Rebecca Ferguson. I'm familiar with the David Lynch film, which I actually like, but I haven't read the books yet. The story, presented quite differently in the two films, is the classic chosen one archetypal hero story and is embedded with complex religious and political metaphors. This adaptation brings me into the world of Dune, but doesn't tell a complete story. Yet, neither did Fellowship of the Ring, and it was still a great film on its own. Dune ends just a little more abruptly than it needed to, and that's my main criticism, but it also leaves me wanting more. It could have been longer, but it's well acted, the special effects are incredible, and the story is on an epic scale. I still think I prefer the music from the David Lynch film, but the Zimmer score works in conjunction with the movie. Number 2, Pig, stars Nicolas Cage, and is the directorial debut of Michael Sarnowski, and like with Shaka King, I'll be interested in seeing what he chooses to direct next. This is a quiet and meditative drama about loss and grief, in which a battered Nicolas Cage navigates the surreal world of Portland, Oregon's restaurant industry to track down his stolen truffle pig, who is his partner and closest companion. Pig breaks down archetypes about conventional masculinity and the processing of emotions while satirizing and critiquing high-end restaurants. It's fascinating and moving, with an all-time performance from Nick Cage that is subtle and powerful.
The critics aren't real. The customers aren't real. Because this isn't real.
It's one of the best viewing experiences I've had this year, only topped by one other film. Number 1, The Green Knight. It's one of the most beautiful and artful fantasy adaptations I've ever seen. It's the classic story of Gawain and the Green Knight, in which a young man ventures out to meet his destiny. It's a hero's quest story with giants, ghosts, and magic, but accomplished in such a stylized, dramatic way that I found the rhythm of the film to be almost hypnotic. I just love the execution of this story. The visuals are majestic, the look of the eponymous Green Knight is awesome, it's all practical, no computer effects on him. Not that I know of. The costumes look great in a genre where the costumes can sometimes be ridiculous and laughable. There are some stylized editing choices that I really enjoyed. The acting is all really good. Dev Patel brings a tragic brilliance as the lead performer. I love everything about The Green Knight, right down to the playful on-screen text interludes. The pacing for the film might seem slow to others, but like with Dune, I found the detailed execution of the story to be an asset, not a detriment. I like this most because it's a serious fantasy film, and outside of The Lord of the Rings, the fantasy genre has been so cheesy in film. Okay, the original Conan the Barbarian is one of my all-time favorite movies, and some people might find that one cheesy, but I think it's awesome. The Green Knight is a story about a man knowingly going out to meet his death, and I think it's such a timeless, classic story done in such an elegant and masterful way that it's my favorite film of the year. It might be on equal standing with Pig, but if I have to pick one, I'm gonna go with The Green Knight. These are probably a lot different than your picks, and I love that. That's kind of why I wanted to make my list, just because I think it says a lot about who I am and what I'm into, and then your list says what you like and what you're into. I'm also not too hung up on the numbering of these. These are all recommendations. It's kind of hard to put them in any certain order, but I've done my best. Now I can take a break and watch some more movies. Welcome to 2022, and stay tuned for more reviews in the future.